We're going to start today on Ayin Dalet on the base, on the bottom, 74B, 6 lines from the bottom. Am I correct? Is that okay? Thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. And in the source of our learning, we should have base of Migdash immediately. Say a bracha. Okay, so we start. It's the traditional Gemara. It's the first wide line on the page. It's on the bottom. Tanan Hassam. We learned in the Mishnah. This is a Mishnah in Erechin, and the Mishnah is talking about someone that sells a house in a walled city, a city that has a wall around it from the days of Yeshua ben Nun. Doesn't have to have the same wall around it, but it has to have been walled once in the days when the Jewish people came into the land. It says, the rule with someone that sells a house in a city like that is that usually when it comes to fields, when you sell a field, it's really only a lease. You get it back by the Yovel, you get it back by the Jubilee year. When you sell a house in a walled city, you have 1 year to redeem it. And then once that year passes, the purchaser keeps it forever. It never goes out, even by the Jubilee. So it's really a final sale. So we learned that the purchaser of a house would hide on the last day of the year, because of course, if it wasn't for the last minute, nothing would get done. So the seller comes up with the money to buy back the house that he sold, and he's going to look for the purchaser to get it back. It's his last day. The last day is the most important day. He can get it back. So the purchaser would go hide. It becomes incommunicado. You can't find him. So that he should be able to keep the house. So Hiskin Hillel Hazakin the Hillel instituted that you don't need to actually find him. You could throw the money into this room. It was probably a room in the temple, and or the Bezdin or something. And that's what it was. You could throw the money in there, and it was like as if it was returned, and then you get the house back. You break down the house, break down the door to the house, and just go inside. Now the purchaser that paid for the house and you returns his money, so he can come and take his money whenever he wants, but it doesn't matter, you've already got it back. So basically what Hillel instituted was that you can do this return against the person's will. It means without Hillel instituting it, you would not be allowed to do that. This was an institution special that Hillel instituted. Amar Rava says, Mitakanasi shel Hillel nishma, but we can derive from this institution of Hillel that a person can give something against the other person's will. We can understand from that that if someone says to his wife, this is your get, but the condition is that it should be effective, is that you have to give me 200 zuz. And then she gives it to him. If he wants to receive it, then they're divorced. But against his will, she throws it into his property. She throws it at him. It's not going to be a divorce. How do we see this? Since Hillel needed to institute that this should be considered effective, that implies, we're on top of page 75, that giving something against the will is not considered giving. So it's only was instituted in that case when Hillel instituted it, but in other cases it's not going to be good. So in order for her to get her get to work, she needs to give the person money. The person has to be willing to accept it. The husband in this case. So it could be that the husband made a trick over here. This is only your get if you can give me the money. And then he says, try to catch me or see if I'm going to want to take it. Maskefla Rav Papa. Rav Papa is a student of Rava. Rava is the one that is deriving from Hillel what's going to be by a get when there's a stipulation in the get that involves money, and maybe
So much traffic.
the moat was up, and so Hill instituted that it should be effective even though the person doesn't want it. But if Hill didn't institute that, then it wouldn't work. Rav Papa has a question. Some say that it was Rav Papa's question. Some say it's Rav Simi Barashi's question. When did Hillel need to institute that it should work? Not because it's against his will. Hillel needed to institute that it should work because the fellow wasn't there. He was in hiding. So we're really just throwing it into a room and saying, we've given it back, we've made the return. But Aval Bafanov. But if the person is there, the husband said, this is your get on condition that you give me 200 zuz. And the wife comes up with 200 zuz and she gives it to him. And he says, no, I don't want it. Maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe the fact that he's there, I don't need Hillel to institute anything. She gave it to him and that's it. It's a done deal. It's considered given. So he has a question on Rava. That Rava was saying that it has to be willingly that the person accepts it. Rav Papa says, or Rav Rashi says that not necessarily doesn't need to be willing. Ikadamri. Others say that Rava derived something different from the case of Hillel. Those that say Amar Rava mita kanasi shel Hillel, what will derive from the institution of Hillel instituted that if someone buys a house in a walled city, that what happens is that you have 12 months to return it, to buy it back. The seller can buy it back. If he doesn't buy it back, then it leaves his inheritance and it's sold forever. It doesn't even come back by the Jubilee. So, but you have only 12 months to do that. So the guy would go into hiding on the last day of the 12 months. Yeah. Yeah, it's a special case of a house in a walled city. But the guy would go into hiding on the.
Is it any walled city or just the one before
just Yishuv Benin. So the guy would go into hiding. Hillel instituted that even if he goes into hiding, we can still make the return by the seller giving the money back into a room, and the guy will collect the money whenever. Based on that, Amar Rava says, from the institution of Hillel, this is your get, on condition that you give me 200 zuz, the husband demands from his wife. And then she gives it to him. Whether it was willingly, whether it was against the will, having a sina. We see that it is good. When did Hillel need to institute this? That was only Shlei B'fanav. That's because the fellow was in hiding. Aval B'fanav, but if the fellow was here, whether it's willingly or whether it's against his will, it's considered given. That was basically what we had before was the question of Rav Papa and Rava. Now we're saying that that's exactly what Rava was saying. Maskefla Rav Papa, Vitema Rav Sim Barashi, Rav Papa now has a question on Rava. Vidilma fila b'fanav nami. Maybe even if the person is here, midaitian al karchelai. Maybe only if it's willingly. It turned out that Hillel only needed to institute something because the guy wasn't here. If the guy was here and he still said that I don't want to take it, so Hillel would have instituted the same thing. It's not the fact that Hillel instituted that when the guy's not here, you can still make the return, you can still give the money back. That's not telling me anything. That it could be that sometimes the guy is here and he still doesn't want it, and Hillel would have had to institute there as well, right? We don't know what that middle case would have been. Okay. Basically tells us that even if the person is here, you really don't know if giving him something against his will would be considered that it's given. Yeah. Okay. Now we go back to what we learned in the Mishnah. We learned in the Mishnah that if the husband says, "This is your get, but I want my coat back," so the Rabbanan said she has to give the coat back, otherwise it's not a get. The coat was lost, and Shimon ben Gamliel said that you can just pay for it. Amar Rabba Bar Bachana, Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Rabba Bar Bachana says in Imar Rabbi Yechanan, Kol Makom Shoshanim Shimon ben Gamliel Mishnaseinu. Anytime we see Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, is the father of Rebbe, in our Mishnah, halacha k'maisei. The halacha is like him, chutz mi'arav etzidan v'raya achrayna, except for these three cases. Okay. Now the interesting thing is that one of these three cases is our Mishnah. Which one? Tzidan. It said Maisa b'tzidan. It was a story in Tzidan. Tzidan was a story where the person had the coat. He wanted his coat back, and they couldn't. The coat was lost. And according to Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, it was good enough to give the money. We say that the halacha is not like that. The halacha is that you have to actually give the coat back.
Are you allowed to sell, going back, are you allowed to sell property in a walled city, or is it
You're allowed to. It was a bad deal because it wasn't like selling land in Israel where it's like a lease. You get it back in 50 years and you say, okay, whatever. It'll come, it's just temporary. But a house in a walled city was a permanent sale. I don't know. Yeah.
It's also expensive.
Tana Rabbanan, it was taught in a brisa. Someone told me it was in, he met a doctor from South Africa. This was years ago. And so the crazy cases over there, people get brought in. So one time someone was getting brought into the emergency room. He had an axe in his back. There was a guy running behind the stretcher. So what do you want? He says, I want my axe back.
It's reason 43 that I don't live inside. The list.
Anyway, okay. It doesn't have anything to do with this command, except that he wants something back. Okay, Taner Rabbanan. He already wanted his coat back. Taner Rabbanan, Hareza Giteich. This is your get, Raniyar Shali, but I want the paper. I'm not giving you anything. You can keep the letters, but I want the paper back.
Wow. Another reason why I live in this page.
Yeah.
If it was valuable, I guess.
I don't know. Maybe he just wants to make it crazy. So, Einem Megureshes, it's not a good get. The reason why it's not a good get is because it says Binasan Biyada. He has to give her something in her hand. And if he's not giving her anything of substance, it's not considered he didn't fulfill the Torah's prescribed divorce.
Like David that had a tattoo on him or
Yeah,
something?
yeah.
That would work.
Yeah, but you would have to give the entire effort. Yeah. Okay. Well, it goes on and it says, Almanas. Yeah.
There are certain prayers, is it Shema word that must be read, supposed to say by heart? Yes or no?
Usually the prayers are okay to say by heart, but there are parts of the Torah where you officially the written Torah is not supposed to be said by heart,
Right,
except for things that we say in the prayers that everyone knows.
I'm just trying to know because I know that when it comes to davening from like a phone or computer, this some people hold, a certain
Really?
you can't.
I never heard that.
Oh,
Yeah.
when I used to daven from the Yamid here, so the letters were bigger. And I took the iPad up and I was told, no, you can't daven from an iPad. You must daven from a city.
I heard because
Uh-huh.
like a phone or a tablet
It's not really.
it's a
there.
mundane piece of hardware like you have.
I can
internet.
Oh, see, I
understand.
learned it
Uh-huh.
different. I learned it that it's like this. It's not really there. When you hit the button, it disappears.
I don't know.
On which one? Which
Okay.
opinion?
Almanasha Tachsri Liyasaniyah. Let's say the husband says, not that I'm giving you a get and the paper's mine, but I'm keeping the paper. I'm giving you the get and the paper, but I have a stipulation that you have to give me back the paper. Megureshas, that is a good get. So we had two cases here. One is where he doesn't give the paper at all. One is where he gives the paper, but there's a stipulation there. Now the Gemara's understanding that stipulation means, at least right here, this is what we're thinking, that when there's a stipulation, only when she fulfills the stipulation will the get be effective, which means it's only going to be a get when she gives the get back. Which basically means that she was never given the get, because when she gives it back, it's already not hers. So the Gemara asks right away, Maishna Reisha, Maishna Seifa. Why does it work in the Reisha when why does it not work in the Reisha when she's not given the paper? And why does it work in the Seifa when she's given the paper, but she has to give it back when the get is effective? We're going to have a few attempts over here at how to figure this out. There's a contradiction. We could resolve it by saying it's machlokes. We could resolve it by saying that there's another detail in the case. So it starts off with Rav Chisda's answer. He says, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel damar titin lo yistamel. Shimon ben Gamliel that says, you don't have to be so specific about these stipulations. One case was where the guy wanted his coat back and they couldn't find the coat because it was lost, so she was allowed to give the money. What's going on over here is that the reason why it's working when he says I want it back is because he's actually giving her some coins afterwards. So it's considered like he's giving the value of the paper. Wants the paper back, he's going to hang it up, but he's going to give her the value of the paper. Okay, Maskefla Abaya. Abaya asks the question. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel never said that you can exchange the coat for money and she could keep the guy's coat and just give money. That's only when the coat was lost. When the coat is there, Mi Amar, did he say that you can exchange the coat for money? So here also, the paper's still here. The paper has to be given to the wife, and she has to give it back, and he's going to give her money. That's going to be good. Elam Rabaya, Mani Reb Meir. Abaya says no. It's really the opinion of Reb Meir. We get into interesting topic over here. The Amar Reb Meir holds Binan Tanai Kafel. Whenever you make a stipulation, you always have to say, and what happens if not? Say, this is your get if you give me the paper back. And if I don't give you the paper back, then he has to finish off. This is not your get.
He has to give him the hard cover. She doesn't give the paper.
Oh, the paperback hardcover. Okay. Okay.
At least I'm listening, guys.
Freedom.
So so Reb Meir holds Bina Tanai Kafel. You need to double the stipulation. That means you have to go both ways. Yeah. What happened over here? He says, if you give me the paper back, why is she divorced? Oh, the reason why she's divorced is because that wasn't a good stipulation. When he made the stipulation of this is your get on condition that you give me the paper back, he didn't finish off saying, but if you don't give me the paper back, then it's not basically the whole Tanai, the whole stipulation is worthless and it's automatically a good get. That's why we say it's Megureshas. We just drop the Tanai. Maskefla Rava asked a question to Abaya, their contemporaries. You're making it look that the whole issue here was that the stipulation wasn't doubled. You didn't go forward and backwards with the stipulation, the positive and the negative. But if you would have, then it wouldn't have been a good get. You would have said, if you would have said, this is your get on condition that you give me back the paper, and if you don't give me back the paper, then it's not a get. That means it would have been not a good get. If even if she gives it back, it's not a good get because there wouldn't have been any gift. Michti, kol tanai mehecha gamrin lo. Where do we learn? This is Rav asking Abaya. Where do we learn tanai from? Where do we learn that stipulations work? Mitanai b'nei Gad b'nei Reuven. We learn it from the story that when the tribe of Gad and Reuven wanted to inherit the land on the other side of the Jordan. So Moshe Rabbeinu tells them that if you go in to the across the Jordan and you fight in the battle, then it will give you this land. And if you don't go in, then we won't give you. So he had to double that. Well, Ma'ahasam Tanai Kaidim Lamaisa, just like over there, he said the stipulation first. If you go in, then you can inherit the land. See, if the stipulation was if you go in, then you can inherit. It was before the action. Over here, he says, this is your get on condition. He said it wrong. He said, he should have said, if you give me the paper back, this is your get. According to the rules that we get from Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, there's a few rules over there, but one of them is, we just learned that you have to double the Tanai. You have to go both ways, backward, positive and the negative. Another rule that we get from there is that you have to say the action, you have to say the stipulation before the action. And he didn't do that. He said, this is your get, that's the action. If you, on condition that is the stipulation, he did it in the wrong order. Why are you saying that it would have worked? Elam Rava, rather Rava says, Mishum Demaisa Kaidim L'Tanai. The issue over here was not because you didn't double the stipulation backwards and forwards. The issue over here was that you said it in the wrong order. You said, this is your get on condition that you give me the paper back. If you wanted it to be a stipulation, you should have said, if you give me the paper back, this is your get. And then you would have had to double it. And if you don't give me the paper back, it's not. Maskefla Ravada Barava. Ravada Barava is contemporary of Rava, correct? On the paper. It's considered a Talmud Chacham in the Gemara Baba Basra. He asks a question. It says, Taima Demaisa Kaidim L'Tanai. Your issue is that you said this is your get before you said the stipulation. But if you had done the stipulation first, then it wouldn't have been a good get. 1 second. Michti. Call Tanai Me'eche Gamrinla. He goes through the whole process again. Where do we learn the concept of stipulations? Mitanai Bnei Gad Bnei Reuven. We learn it from the tribes that wanted to take the land on the other side of the Jordan. Then Moshe Rabbeinu makes a stipulation with them. Just like over there, the stipulation wasn't in the action itself. It was two separate items. It was if you go across the border to fight, then you'll get that land over there. It wasn't, and if you don't, but it wasn't in the item itself. Over here, this is yours if you give it back to me.
So you have to say
this is
the condition that you have to say.
You can make a condition, but it
don't. Then
right. You have to say
both.
You have to say both. You have to have the condition before the action, and you also have to have the condition in something else, not in this thing itself. It would have been like the condition is that you give the land back or something. You can't be that same in the same thing. It's all in the same get. He has to give the get back in order for the get to work. She has to give the get back.
She's not divorced until she gives it back.
Right.
Is that it?
Yeah.
I guess the big deal here is that normally a get totally severs any control. Right? That's the essence of divorce. Is he has no control over her and she's free to do what she wishes.
Yeah, I think that issue comes up in other places. I think over here, that's not the main issue. Over here, the main issue is that when she gives the get back and then the get takes effect, she really isn't being given anything. And the pasuk says, "V'nasan biyada." There has to be some sort of transfer of ownership of something. The transfer of ownership of that paper is what causes the divorce.
The transfer from her back to him.
No, the transfer from him to her. Now, since it only
okay,
takes
let's say that's the delivery of the get.
Right.
And normally that's the end. They're divorced.
Right. And that has to come with a certain ownership, a certain value. But because over here the divorce is only taking place when she gives it back, she ends up with nothing at the time of the divorce. She's not really being given anything.
I see.
Yeah, we're going to come up with some other things that will discuss the severing of the relationship. That it comes up I don't think that's the main point here.
So it's like there's no Kenyan because she gave it back.
Right.
Okay, got it.
There's no value to it.
Thank you.
So one second. Hillel is thinking. One second. The Gemara set us up for you've been primed. Ravada Barava says the issue over here is not because the stipulation wasn't doubled, not because you said you didn't say the stipulation before the action, it's because the stipulation is in the same thing that the action is. Ravashi says Hamani Rebbehi. You can follow. We have a simple answer. We're following the opinion of Rebbe Damar Ravuna Amar Rav. It's probably supposed to be Amar Rebbe. Ravuna said, well, it's probably Amar Ravuna Amar Rav Amar Rebbe. I don't know if Ravuna ever saw Rebbe. Kala Imer Al Manas Kaimer Me'achshav Dami. Anyone that says Al Manas on condition, it's as if he's saying from now, which means like this.
Sure, absolutely.
I didn't invite her to this year.
So,
I give you a trophy.
but what we're saying now, what Ravashi is saying is that Rebbe is of the opinion that whenever someone says on condition that, it really means that it's really happening right now. And when you fulfill the stipulation, it goes back to it's retroactive, that it was really effective from the time that it was given. If that's the case, then when he gave her the get, and he says, this is your get on condition that you give me back the paper, the get is effective from when it was given. Only thing is, you have to fulfill a stipulation. When you fill that stipulation, it goes back retroactively to then. So it turns out that it was really hers for the duration of the time when the get was effective, which continues to be effective after. But when the get started, which was when it was given, it was considered hers. It's just considered a matana al manas lahachzer, a gift that needs to be returned, which we say is considered a gift. So in other words, she did have there was an asina there. There was a venas on the other. He did give her something. That's Ravashi's interpretation.
Excuse me, but didn't we learn that during that period until she would have finalized it, she couldn't really get married?
She can't get married in this, right? But that's only because we can't access the future during then, but it retroactively it was. In other words, if she would have had her relations then, it wouldn't
Same
have been.
thing with the husband.
Yeah.
We went with everyone except for the wife's maid.
Yeah, if we would go back and try to do a death penalty on her because of her relations that she had then, we would say that she was divorced. Okay. Askin Shmuel instituted Gittin Daf, that if someone that's on his deathbed wants to give a get, so he has to make a statement like this. He has to say, Im lai mati, based on everything that we learned. Now, yeah, we learned that the stipulations have to come first, and you have to do the stipulation before the action, right?
I wish I knew about this now. Towards the beginning of
All the stipulation, right? All the rules of stipulation. Yeah, it's a Gemara Kedushin.
You're a young man, you still have plenty of life to live, don't worry.
No, for the flow.
No, we left
learning.
out. This is a very important
Yeah.
concept in stipulations. Is that it has to be Tanai Kafel, Tanai Kaidim Lamaisa. You know, there's we'll see one more is coming up. Saskin Shmuel Begita, the Shchimiram Laimati, the person needs to say, if I don't die, La Yehe get, it should not be a get. The Imati Yehe get. And if I do die, it should be a get. You see, he doubled it. If I don't die, it's not a get. That's what a Shchimira gives a get. He doesn't only wants it to be a get if he dies. So if I don't die, it's not a get. And if I do die, it is a get. Umar says, Why doesn't he say it the other way? If I die, this is a get. And if I don't die, it's not a get. A person shouldn't say something negative about himself. You should start off with saying, if I don't die. Not saying if I do die. Shouldn't speak like that. Okay. Lo yehi get imlay mati. Maybe you should say it the other way. It should not be a get if I don't die. What would he gain by that? Then what he's gaining is that he's pushing off the death to after he says get, the lo yehi get. He's saying first discusses the get, then he says about his death. Well, we say be'inan tanai kayed olamai, so that's not going to work because you need the stipulation before the action, which means he has to say, if I don't die, then it should be a get. He has to put the stipulation before the action, before the get part. Maskefla Rava has a question. Michti kol tanai mechig gamrina, and where do we learn the concept of stipulations? Mitanai b'nei Gad b'nei Reuven, from the stipulations that were made to the two tribes. Ma hasamein kaidim lalav, just like over there, the positive came before the negative. He said, if you go in and fight, then you will get this land. If you don't go in and fight, then you won't get this land. Over here, you're doing it the opposite. You're doing, if I don't die, then it's not a get. That's not the positive. You have to do the positive before the negative. He has to say if he does. Afkol, lafuki hach over here, the lav kaidim lahain. He's saying it backwards. He's saying if I don't die, it's not a get. He's supposed to do the positive stipulation that it should be effective first. Elama Rava, other Rava says, Imlay mati la yeget. Imati yeget, imlay mati la yeget. You have to say 3 parts. You have to, instead of doubling, you have to say it 3 times. Why? Because you don't want to start with negative. So you start off with the positive. If I don't die, it should not be a get. That's how you want to start. But then what the rules of the stipulation come in is you have to do the positive first, which means if I do die, then this is a get, and then he wants to finish off. If I don't,
the positive?
no,
Oh, yeah.
it is the positive. If I do die, it's the positive, but not. There's 2 types of positive. There's a positive, like there's the wishful thinking,
Right. Yeah,
positive,
that's what I thought.
and then there's the other positive versus the negative,
Like
which
the
is
yes, as opposed to no.
which is, will the get be effective? That's the positive. The negative, the get will not be effective. So if he starts off with the wishful thinking positive, that is, if I don't die, this should not be a get, and then he has to do the positive of the act of when will this be a get. He has to say that if I do die, this is a get, and then he says if I don't die, it's not a get. He has to go back to say the negative. Okay. He explains why he has to do this. If I don't die, it should not be a get. A person shouldn't say something negative about himself. You need the positive before the negative. Okay. Basically, over here we had 4 rules of a get, of a tanai. The double the tanai, right? Back and forth. You have to say the tanai before the stipulation before the action. If this, then it will be effective. You have to say the positive before the negative. You can't say the negative before the positive. Well, you can, but then you'll have to repeat it afterwards. And we also learned that it needs to be in 2 separate items. You can't have the stipulation in the thing itself. Okay. There's a new Mishnah. This is your get. Es Abba. As long as I still want you to serve my father. I guess they had the father living with them, maybe. All right. So, as long as you continue nursing my son. Maybe it's only his son. That would probably be the explanation here. Otherwise, why is he demanding that? Maybe he had a son from a second wife that couldn't nurse, and he wants to divorce her, or she wants to divorce, but he doesn't want to lose the wet nurse. So he's saying, I'll divorce you, but I still need you to do these, either to serve my father, I still need you to nurse.
Nursing, that means they just had a baby.
They had
So
had
if
another
he's
baby.
divorcing her, yeah, she just had a baby.
Right, and she probably has probably has another baby from another wife that can't nurse for whatever reason. Okay. Hold on that. Wait. Okay. Kamihi miniktai. How long should she nurse him? What's considered the length of time? Shtei shanim, 2 years, according to the Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda says, 18 months. Okay. Mesa ben Mesa av, get. It doesn't matter if the child passed away or the father passed away and she can't nurse, she can't serve. It's fine, that's not her fault. The get is a get. She did what she was supposed to do, and the get is going to be effective. Let's say he says, this is your get, but you have to serve my father for 2 years. As long as you nurse my son for 2 years, then that becomes a problem, because Mesa ben Amar Ha'av, it's not because you're doing anything wrong. I just don't want you here, or the child dies, or the father doesn't want this aid, right? So ain't a get. It's not a good get. He said 2 years. She's not doing 2 years. It's not her fault, but it doesn't matter. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says no. It's not her fault. She did her best. It's considered a get. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel makes a rule. Any blocking of this fulfillment of the stipulation that's not coming from her, that she was doing her best, a get, that's still considered a get. What do you want from me? This is, I did my best.
The same as we went with the sailors and the donkey. When the river got dammed, it wasn't their fault. They weren't hired, but they had to go get donkeys to keep the ship. It's like an illness. It's beyond their control. It should not have been part of the
Okay. Okay.
Sounds similar.
Yeah. It's referring that there really was a double stipulation. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. Yeah. At least according to those opinions that hold it needs to be. And me being on Kule High, does she have to nurse for 2 years? For a minute, we have a question over here, contradiction. Shimashta yom echad, hinaktai haniktai yom echad, haris again. She only has to do it for 1 day. Serve him or nurse the baby. All right. The father says, I want you to nurse my son. So the Tanakama says 2 years or 18 months. You have a brisa that says once she fulfills it in any sort of fashion, it's already fulfilled. It's considered a get. Amar Rav Chisda like Kasher. Rav Chisda says it's not a problem. Interesting. In the last Gemara also, we had Rav Chisda coming in to resolve contradiction, and he says Hamani, who is it? Over here he does the same thing. Rav Chisda like Kasha Harabanan Harab Shimon ben Gamliel Machlekes Rabbanan Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, and that Machlekes takes us back to when Rab Shimon ben Gamliel said that you can give the money for the coat. You don't have to actually give the coat. So over here, the Rabbanan say they have to do it literally. So that would be, but the Gemara is going to explain. Masnis in Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, our Mishnah is Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. It says it needs to be, it means it doesn't need to be exactly to nurse. It means the general concept of nursing, which is for 2 years. The Brisa, but the Brisa that says that 1 day is enough, that's the Rabbanan, because the Rabbanan say you have to give actually the coat. So that would be whatever. I know it's very specific. It's you nursed, okay, good. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says you can give the money. It's like the general concept. It means you have to nurse for 2 years. Gemara says 1 second. Me the say for Reb Shimon ben Gamliel happy. Since at the end of the Mishnah it says Reb Shimon ben Gamliel argues. Obviously, the first opinion is not Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. He's not arguing on himself. So that wasn't exactly the same point over here. But whatever the case is, it sounds like the Mishnah is not Reb Shimon ben Gamliel because he only enters into the Mishnah at the end. So he switches it around. Remember we said Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says he can give money instead of the coat? That's the brisa that says you don't have to nurse for 2 years. 1 day is enough because Reb Shimon ben Gamliel was lenient about stipulations. You don't have to fulfill it exactly, the general concept. So therefore, you only have to nurse for one day. Masnisin Rabbanim, but the Rabbanim were very, very strict about stipulation. Therefore, you have to nurse for 2 years in order for that stipulation to be effective. Rava gives another answer. What did we have over here in the last case? We had Abaya giving the second answer. Here it's Rava. Okay. Rava's the son-in-law of Rav Chisda.
I don't understand the position of the Rabbanim. How can you call that a divorce then? In other words, can she marry for those 2 years or can't she?
According to this opinion, according to this brisa, once she nursed for 1 day, she fulfilled the stipulation and now she's good.
But the position of the Rabbanim is that she has to do it the whole 2 years.
Yeah.
So can she marry in those 2 years?
No. Those 2 years she has to wait to make sure she finishes it.
Then she's not divorced yet.
Right. But when the 2 years are up, it would go back retroactive. According to the opinion of Rebbe, any almanas goes back retroactive.
Retroactively, she was divorced 2 years ago, even though she couldn't marry anyone.
Right.
All right.
I had the same question, Naftali.
Thank you.
The practical question would be, can she start dating? Can she put her profile up on the shidduchim chats?
Dr. Sense is no.
Tornish. It's pastas.
He says, you'll see, I'm actually divorced. You just have to wait. Ella,
You have to face
okay.
that for 2 years.
Right.
You compute it because it's not really existing.
Right. Rava Malay Kasha Kam Bestam Kam Mefarish. Depends. The Mishnah was when he didn't say anything, how long to nurse. And the Bryce says when he said 1 day. So he said 1 day, so it's only 1 day. If you don't say anything, then it's for 2 years, because that's how long a baby would be natural to nurse for. I'm sorry, Ravashi doesn't explain the contradiction. Ravashi is just coming in to say that if someone doesn't say how long to nurse, he only means once, 1 day. Doesn't mean 2 years. Okay, he argues on that. Tanan, it was taught in the Mishnah. How long should this woman nurse the child? Stay shanim for 2 years. Rabbi Yehuda says 18 months. According to Rava, we understand nicha. Makes sense because Rava said that the Mishnah was referring to stam. So it means 2 years. Why does it have to go for 2 years? He didn't say exactly. And according to Ravashi, if he doesn't say, then it's only 1 day. So it's hachikamar. What he means to say is, Ravashi explains the Mishnah that when he says, I needed to nurse my son, and that only means for 1 day, and then the Mishnah says that it means 2 years. So how does Ravashi explain the Mishnah? It means 1 day during the first 2 years. After the baby's 2 years old, then it's not considered nursing. The benefits of nursing is when the child is under 2 years old.
So she's concurrently nursing another baby.
Probably.
Because otherwise.
Right. Meisvei. Where's the question? This is your get. Where's the question? If the child dies, or if the father says, I don't want you in serving me, not because you're doing anything wrong, just because I've had enough. So it's not a get. It's not going to be a get. So Bishlam Rava, according to Rava, we can understand. He says that it needs to be for 2 years. So the child died within 2 years. So he didn't finish the 2 years. We understand what the Tanna Kamma is saying. He didn't finish the 2 years. But Reisha B'dlei Parish, say for the Parish. He didn't explain how that it was safe the Parish. When he said it needs to be 2 years. So why over here is it not a get? Because he said clearly that it needs to be 2 years. The Reisha, it doesn't need to be to be 2 years, and that's why it is a get, because it was stam. Yeah. So in the ratio we said, or is a get. Safe we say it's not a get. Ella Rav Ashi, but according to Rav Ashi, that says that when he doesn't explain specifically how long she should be nursing, it really only means 1 day. And then we have a case where the baby dies. So Maishna Reisha, Maishna Seifa. What's the difference? In both of those cases, he didn't fulfill the stipulation, because how did the baby die if in the Reisha, according to Rav Ashi, he doesn't need to nurse for 2 years. She needs to nurse just for 1 day. Obviously, the baby died before that day, so he never fulfilled either of them. So what's the difference? Why is it a get? Kasha, the Gemara says it's a kasha according to Rav Ashi. Okay, we'll leave it over here.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Good day.
Thank you. So, you still there?